Well, first of all, I'm Kyle. Like Cheryl said, I run the due diligence process for Reg CF, which is Republic's core product, which I'm assuming a lot of you are familiar with. Companies come and raise capital with us, usually as a supplement to a larger round, and they're opening up the investment opportunity to their crowd, their community of users, customers, supporters, and of course, active investors on Republic who can invest as little as $100 in these deals. One of the ways that Republic differentiates from some other platforms is in the space is that we are really highly curated, and my team is responsible for delivering that curation, making sure all the companies we work with are super high quality, great team, great product, meaningful, compelling traction, an exciting market that's not overly competitive, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought we've heard awesome nuggets and awesome information about how to build an investment thesis, how to get started with angel investing. I thought for Republic, it'd be cool if we actually talked through a deal that we've hosted, how our team thought about it, how we came to the official yes from the investment committee. And then for the more exciting portion of this segment, I'll turn it over to Justin and ask him a few questions, the founder of the company, Aavrani, who I'll actually be walking through, and we'll hear a bit from him. So a little bit about how we looked at Aavrani. So Aavrani raised with us a little while ago. They raised shy of $500,000 with us. We were super excited about it when they came to, were potentially interested in working with us. And I think to talk you through my thesis and the way I went through it, I started with thinking a little bit about the market. So broadly, you hear a lot about skincare, a lot about prestige skincare. You hear a lot about deals getting funded in skincare and lots of M&A activity, which is a strong indication just generally that it's an industry that's worth looking at, worth investing in, not impossibly niche, has funds flowing in and out of it, et cetera, et cetera. When you actually dig in though, and Justin, led us to a lot of these points in our diligence call with him, but the skincare market in the US is $18 billion alone in 2018. So it's probably even larger now. So it far and away passes the litmus test that you might hear commonly from some VCs or angels, like minimum $1 billion or $2 billion market size. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you realize it's not just a massive market. It's also really high growth, growing 30% year over year. And to contextualize that, the makeup market is obviously huge as well, but is only growing at 4% annually. So this isn't just a huge market that's been big forever and it's kind of business as usual. It's actually seeing rapid growth and lots of innovation and tons of excitement. So some of the key drivers when you dig a little bit deeper are precisely the trends that Aavrani was looking to capitalize on. Natural beauty and clean beauty, the rise of prestige beauty, key drivers there. So certainly we were excited about the market. The question here is, of course, not really about the size or growth rate of this market, because those boxes are, of course, checked, but really other things about the deal, the product, the traction, the team. Does our evaluation of those things indicate that this company can actually make moves in this market and capitalize on the growth and the size that I was talking about? So digging into those things right away, product and traction. If you take a look at the Aavrani product, I would encourage everyone to look at the site or on Republic's campaign. We can link in the chat section. Beautiful product, stellar branding, clear that they either have some serious creative muscle on the team or they've outsourced it to a great agency. Certainly the box is checked there. And even though the space is crowded, they have a strong, clear message and niche that they carved out. It's Indian American focused and inspired beauty. And Justin's co-founder and the CEO, Rushi, actually, took many of the traditions and best practices that she learned from her family because she's an Indian American, and infused them into the product, which totally speaks when you take a look at the brand, and you can see how it's compelling for both Indian American customers and just people who are curious alike. And then the other thing to notice, digging in a bit on the traction, which we've heard a lot about in this webinar. So at the time when when Aavrani was interested in working with us, they were just about had a year under their belt since they had launched. So this year was a banner year. They crossed $1 million in revenue right out of the gate, and they achieved an 84% gross margin. Now, I speak to so many founders and so many awesome companies, and this is just something that you don't see often. It often fairly and reasonably takes companies years to take the supply side of the business, procurement, packaging, a clean supply chain. that stuff takes a lot of time, and a really seasoned team. It takes a really seasoned team to get that together and achieve an 84% margin in their first year since launch. To contextualize that margin, usually we see consumer companies at this stage, we hope to see like 50 to 70% margins, or maybe they're sub 50, but they have some exciting details about like how they're going to improve that. Estee Lauder, I checked just before this, had a high 70s gross margin in their skincare business. So Aavrani in their first year of launch is, already batting in the leagues of pretty serious skincare and beauty players. It also takes companies years to nail the demand side of the business, totally fairly. It's not easy to build a business that generates $1 million in annual revenues. So again, we knew when we saw that right out of the gate, super exciting. To nail the distribution channels, the right marketing mix, effective performance marketing, et cetera. The fact that they did that first year out of the gate was super exciting to us. Lastly, just around the team and the backing. So I would say as a caveat, Republic, we think that all teams can be exciting. We don't think that a founder needs to have experience selling a company for $1 billion, or they need to have impossibly specific domain expertise. We want to encourage first-time founders to come and raise with us always. But when a team comes to us with some super exciting credentials and a super relevant background, it is music to our ears. So when people talk about strong teams within venture and the tech ecosystem, there are a few different archetypes. There's like the corporate MBA, there's people with really deep industry experience, and then there are seasoned startup operators that have built and sold companies. Justin and Rushi uniquely check all of those boxes. So they both have really stellar corporate credentials, educated at Wharton, got their MBAs there. The who's who of corporate, big corporate firms on their resumes, like Credit Suisse and Goldman and Warburg Pincus. But most notably, I think Justin actually was installed at and operated at Tatcha, which was a similar prestige skincare brand that's actually Japanese-inspired beauty, scaled it and assisted it as it was sold to Unilever for $500 million. So it's rare that you see the roundedness of such a great team in all senses of the world, in all senses of the word. And they're also backed by a couple of funds at Wharton, some premier scout funds like Dorm Room Fund and Rough Draft Ventures. So checked all the boxes in that sense too. So I'm super excited to turn it over to Justin now for a few minutes to talk about Aavrani. Definitely want to keep it open-ended, but I have a few questions just to help guide us. So Justin, if you don't mind sharing a little bit while we were on the Tatcha experience and your experience building a similar brand, I'd love for you to talk about some specific experiences that you had at Tatcha that has helped you and will help you build and scale Aavrani.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining. I just want to kick it off by saying the entire Aavrani team is a huge fan of Republic. The entire process was wildly seamless. Some of the investors have provided tons of insight on top of just capital and have also become customers. So we're huge fans of this model and think it's really powerful for companies. And so, the experience at Tatcha was a wild one. The company started, we invested, it had less than 10 million in revenue, and it sold, it had over 100 million in revenue for $500 million to Unilever. And some of the things that I learned about that were critical, one was the scaling operations process. A lot of times in the skincare world, companies are producing products at home. They're literally crafting them in their kitchens, and they can grow pretty large that way. But then switching to a manufacturer, starting with a 3PL, being able to scale from a $1 million business to a $10 million business is really difficult if you haven't done it before or you're not talking to the right people. So getting that experience actually scaling a company was critical. And Tatcha experienced some issues when they had kind of hit that $10-15 million mark where they needed to switch everything over to owning it themselves. And there were a bunch of issues. We avoided all of that. So we are primed to scale to up to $100 million with kind of our current infrastructure. And the next thing I learned was about creating a really powerful brand and then building a world around that brand. Tatcha just did an outstanding job of not just being a skincare product. That's the problem with a lot of the larger companies is they create products and not brands. So whether it be L'Oreal or Estee Lauder, a lot of their products are great, but their brands leave consumers wanting. And so learned about building that world that's vibrant, that has a founder, Vicky, in the case of Tatcha, and for Aavrani, Rushi, and having them be someone as a source of both ancient rituals that they're sharing with the US market, but also just a leader for a company and to our consumers. And then lastly, focused a lot on what it takes to be successful in skincare and how much money you do need to raise. And that's kind of where Republic comes in. There are a lot of companies that kind of never make it to that $1 million mark. Big reason there is they don't get the money to do so. There is investment required to get out there in order to kind of establish yourself. Once you do that, the sky's the limit. But I've seen a lot of brands where they kind of putter out at around 500K in revenue simply because they're unable to get that investment and really grow.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. If you could talk through the biggest challenge or set of challenges that you've faced since launching Aavrani, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think every day in some ways has its own challenge. That's what I love about being an entrepreneur. But the biggest challenge we face, I think, without a doubt, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs would share this, is recruiting the right people. I think we've gotten extremely lucky. I am very proud to, look at the team. You'll see some of the team members listed on our Republic site, and that team has grown since then, in part due to Republic and the success we had there. But finding the individuals who are going to execute on the dream is a near impossible task, because not only are you asking them to work harder than they might have at their corporate job, but you're asking them to do that for probably half of what they were making before. So you want them to work twice as hard. You want them to get paid half as much. And what you need to deliver is something powerful. You need to deliver a brand message and a meaning that they might not otherwise get elsewhere. So for us, it's definitely been recruiting, and whether it be Radima, Ankita, Arushi, we have interns now. We've always focused on recruiting the best. And so we get hundreds of applications for every job that we open, simply because we've been focused on recruiting the best and recruiting a diverse team as well.
One quick follow-up on that. Given the stage that you guys are at now, to what extent do you think it's important to hire a bunch of scrappy generalists who are working to, willing to work for twice as hard for half the pay like you described? And to what extent is it important to bring in people with specific domain experience and to lead that specific division of the business? And do those needs evolve over time as the business scales?
Yeah, I think at an early stage, before you're doing 10 million in revenue, you should focus exclusively on generalists who can work extremely hard. You would be blown away with how much every single company is built on the Google search of how do I do this? When we were first creating our products, we Googled North American skincare contract manufacturers, and we have 600 5-star reviews, but it all started with a Google search. And so the idea of really needing some kind of intense technical experience, I think that's BS. Anyone who tells you that is not operating at an early startup level. That said, I do think there's a switch that gets flipped once you start to hit a few million in revenue and you get into a relationship game. Because a lot of the world out there, whether we like it or not, is not how good you are or how great your products are, but who you know. And especially when it comes to getting into retailers, getting onto QVC, doing things of that nature, it is a lot of a closed door, who you know game. And you're essentially paying people for relationships. And I know that there will be a time when Aavrani needs to start doing that. But until then, we've been focused on engaging advisors. Advisors are kind of like the really cheap version of hiring a senior executive person, because you can pay them with a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of equity. And then you can get, if you leverage them correctly, a lot out of them. So we meet with our advisors at least once every quarter, and we say, hey, here's the 3 things that we need: an introduction to the head of merchandising at Sephora, an introduction to this person. And they do that, and they own a little bit of our success. So I highly recommend super scrappy people for employees, and bringing on a team of advisors who you can engage with a tiny bit of equity and the upside for just one meeting a month and get their relationships.
Awesome. I think that's great advice. I know we're running short on time, but just last question in short, what are you most excited for perhaps for the year ahead for Aavrani?
So if you look up here, this is our new logo. We did a big rebrand that we're launching with in August. It is awesome. The colors are insane. The artwork is beautiful. The products are all now 100% sustainable and glass jarring. It is the brand that is going to eventually get bought by L'Oreal for $1 billion. This is the real thing. And I am pumped for that. So please, my recommendation to everyone on here, the biggest help that you could do, whether you've invested or you haven't, is to go to Aavrani on Instagram, follow us, DM us, talk about what you want to see, what you're interested in. My goal is to be back on Republic. I hope that maximum amount raised gets up to 5 million and we can raise our entire seed round in Series A on Republic and go from there. So thank you guys so much. And of course, happy to answer any questions. I'll drop my email in the chat.
Thank you, Justin. We are so grateful to have companies like Aavrani and founders like Justin in our portfolio. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll kick it back to you,